Our next guest is DeLena of the DEA. John is so special that he got whisked away to Washington, D.C. for months, and we were missing him greatly. Now I'm told he's back in New Hampshire for good, where he belongs. So good.
It was actually 1 year ago today that I did. The new administrator from DEA called and asked me to come down to Washington, D.C. to help her with her congressional and public affairs and also her outreach. And while I'm very, very comfortable here in New Hampshire, my home and the job that I have here, and my house and my family, when you're passionate about something, when you're so passionate about something, sometimes you have to get a little bit uncomfortable, to do what you believe in. And even at this point in my career, 27 years with DEA, I'm so driven by what we're dealing with, and we do things a little differently here in New Hampshire, Carlton. We met years and years ago when we started this whole outreach thing with DEA, what was DEA 360 back then, which is now Operation Engage. But I've always said, and I used the opportunity for the last year to tell Ann Milgram, the DEA administrator, every chance I could, that we do things differently in New Hampshire. New Hampshire truly is the gold standard for how we respond to this crisis, and we've heard a lot of people talk about the great work of outreach here in New Hampshire and some of the challenges, and I think I'm just going to use a few minutes to talk about what I think are the biggest challenges that we're facing right here in this country. We have two cartels, the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartel, who have a business model which is relentless expansion and widespread addiction. What they want to do is addict every single American with drugs like fentanyl. That's what their goal is, and they won't be happy unless they achieve that goal. Many people ask at all these events where I speak, excuse me, why would they create a substance like fentanyl that ultimately is killing off their customer base? And this is the reality of the challenge that we have. And the truth to that answer is this: they don't care. They would rather addict everybody, but if they kill 107,622 Americans like they did last year, 107,622 Americans were poisoned last year. 66% of those were due to synthetic opioids like fentanyl. They just don't care because they know there's 400 million Americans somewhere behind there, and their goal is to reach them in any way that they can. Carlton mentioned the war on drugs. We look at it now like we're in a race to save lives. That's really what this is about. We need to educate and inform as many people as we can, and the reason why I flew home last night from a year in Washington, D.C. to be here today is because I believe so much in what the Raymond Coalition for Youth does, and when I see these kids up here and I listen to what they have to say, that's my hope, that someday I will be able to stop coming out and I can retire, hopefully, because there are so many young people that are going to pick up that ball and run with it, because we need to do that so badly right now. They are trying to reach, these cartels are trying to reach our youngest people on social media. Their efforts are unparalleled, trying to get to young people on Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok to try to sell these fake pills that are made with nothing but fentanyl inside them. It's the most deadly thing that we've ever seen across this country. We talked before here in New Hampshire about 2 years ago when we first started seeing fake Adderall pills that were made with methamphetamine. And I thought at the time it was the most insidious thing I'd ever seen these drug trafficking organizations do, because in my opinion they were simply targeting the youngest generation by putting something like methamphetamine in a substance that children and young people in America thought was Adderall. And they doubled down on it, and what they've done now is they've taken those same fake Adderall pills and now they're just putting fentanyl in it. Because the goal of the cartels to addict everybody, they would rather addict them on a substance like fentanyl, sadly enough, because you have to keep coming back for more. And fentanyl in this country has become the ultimate shapeshifter. They're putting it in every single substance that we can imagine right now. That's why we see mass casualty overdose events where people thought they were using cocaine or thought they were using methamphetamine or heroin, only to find out that somewhere along the line in the supply chain, these cartels decided, we just want you to be addicted to fentanyl, so we're gonna put fentanyl inside it. And that's why we see incidents like what happened in spring break, where we have naval cadets who went out and made a bad decision and bought what they thought was cocaine, and it turned into a tragic decision because we lost some of them, because somewhere along the line somebody put fentanyl inside it, and they had no intention of ever using fentanyl. We talk about all the great work that we've done here in New Hampshire, making naloxone and Narcan readily available, but if you're somebody that thinks you're using a substance like cocaine, maybe you're not prepared to have Narcan readily available. So we're going to continue, sadly, to see those numbers rise. 107,622 reasons why we have to show up at events like this, but it can't stop here. I think I said last year, well done is better than well said. We can sit in here and talk about it all morning, but what we do when we leave here, what the young people that already stood up here very bravely do in the coming days, weeks, months, and years of their life will shape how this country responds to this. I've said over and over again, I think back in 2017, the first time I met Carlton, I believed back then that there will be a period in this country where people are going to read about what happened in our nation's history. And when I was saying that back then, it was when we had 80,000 Americans dying of a drug overdose or drug poisoning. Now we have 107,000. And I still believe that there will be a period where we look back in history book and they look and say, what happened in our country? That, first of all, it just became acceptable. That more people weren't rising up and saying, what is going on in our nation, in our communities, in our homes, that we're losing so many people to these drug poisonings. But what I think is more important is what that next chapter will be, which is, what is the response going to be? How are we as Americans going to push back on this, and how are we going to defeat that? How are we going to defeat those two cartels, by the way, which is what what drives me every single day. But how are we going to get our communities to pay attention, to listen, to understand just how dangerous and deadly these substances and these fake pills can be? And that response is what drives me, and that's what, coming to a meeting like this, to see so many people celebrating, the great work of the Raymond Coalition, but understanding that we all have to go home and we all have to have those conversations, whether it's for Drug Take Back Day, which is tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at about 200 locations throughout the great state of New Hampshire, where sometimes we get as much as 15,000 pounds in New Hampshire in 4 hours of unneeded, unwanted, or expired medication. Carlton mentioned a lot of times this stuff, it begins in people's homes, so we have to get that out of harm's way and safely dispose of it. We need to make sure that we're doing that. We need to make sure that we're putting people in a position, because, well, relentless expansion and widespread addiction is the goal of those cartels. It's what we do in response to it that matters now more than ever before. We have never seen a deadlier drug than fentanyl. It's become more and more deadly in the time that I've seen it since 2015-16, when it first made its tragic appearance here. We've seen a rise in methamphetamine throughout New Hampshire. Tragically, we talked about it, Jay Fallon and I talked about this a few years ago from HIDA, talked about how we saw this coming. That was just a mechanism to get more people using drugs by these cartels, and then they want to make that shift and get them shifted over to that deadliest and most addictive substance of all. The last thing I want to say is, you'll hear me use the word poisonings. This is language that we've adopted now more than ever, because so many people don't intend to even use this substance. So many people, we had 100 families come to DEA headquarters back in June for what we call the nation's first ever family summit on the overdose and poisoning crisis. And we spent so much time talking to parents who lost children to one pill. Children who they hadn't even begun to experiment with anything, who during COVID and all the other stressors that were on them made one bad mistake and either shared a pill that somebody had given them, or went online, went on Snapchat, went on a social media site and had a pill delivered. And sadly and tragically, these people found these children dead. We started family Faces of Fentanyl Memorial in DEA headquarters, where we asked people if they wanted to submit a photo. We would memorialize them in DEA headquarters, and really for us it would be to supply the why. Every single day that we show up for work, we would walk by and see these faces. What started out with a couple hundred photos now has over 4,000 photos in the lobby of DEA headquarters. We've outgrown it. We're having to turn it into a digital platform because we have so many people that are sending pictures in. pictures that represent people from 17 months old to 70 years old. This drug does not discriminate. It does not discriminate. And with all the great work that we do here in New Hampshire, our law enforcement partners, our congressional delegation, the governor, who has definitely led the way in this whole thing, but really, we all have to do more. We just can't stop. We have to be as relentless as those two cartels, because they don't stop. They're not bound by any rules. They're not bound by any laws. They have unlimited funds. So it truly is an adversary like we've never seen before. But you have to understand, the one thing I always try to do whenever I come here or anywhere else is just tell you the truth. You know, you have to know exactly what's going on out there. That they are right now, every single day, flooding these drugs into our communities. And New Hampshire is not safe from it. We know those cartels have reach here. We know that we're seeing more and more fentanyl and more drugs like methamphetamine than ever before. More and more fake pills. The fake pills to me are the most disturbing trend that I've ever seen, because so many people just don't understand how deadly those pills can be. So with that, I'll shift it back to empowerment. And you know, it truly is about informing, especially our young people, so you can make good, healthy, empowered decisions. You can lead a drug-free life. You can, you know, be able to speak up and be leaders within your own friend circles every single day. We rely upon you to do that. And I can't tell you how much respect I have for you, first of all, and how much I appreciate every single thing you do every single day. Thank you to Celeste and everybody else. Thank you.